I can still remember when my dad cried for the first time in my presence. I was 9 years old, got home, he gathered my sister Yasmin and Terry together, my little brother Albert, and he was just sitting there crying. And he had some bad news for us. He said Mom wasn't going to be living with us anymore. And just thinking about it now, I'm sort of tearing up just thinking about that memory of my dad crying. I don't know what happened. Maybe my mom died, or maybe there was an accident. But it turns out that Mom had announced to my dad the day before that she wanted a divorce. And not only a divorce, but she didn't want the kids either. So she just wanted to leave and just have a new life and a new beginning. And I think my little brother was the most devastated of all four of us. But life went on. My dad, to his credit, took on the challenge of being a single father at 50 years old. And he was an unusual dude. You know, my dad never spanked me. I wish he would have spanked me, but he never did, you know. I gave him plenty of reasons why he should pull out his belt and just take off on me and just, make me learn that lesson the hard way. But instead, my dad wanted to talk to me. His way of punishing me was wanting to sit me down and talk about what happened, and for me to listen and respond, and for me to have an answer about what had gone wrong. And I thought that was like the worst punishment ever, Especially you're a young boy, you're little, you want to go play, and you're like, just hit me, man. But he never did. And my dad loved to give advice. And there was times where it was just, it seemed like he was passing on advice that was given to him. Maybe his own father had said some things to him about, when you walk into a room and people are working, help out. If you're in trouble, there's some adults around, reach out to them, they'll help you. Seemed pretty common, but that's what he was telling me, and I took it all in. And my dad was huge on education. And of course, I wasn't, I was a little boy. And I would come home and he would ask me what I learned today, and I wasn't paying attention, so I don't remember, right? And all I can think the day that this happened that I can recall was, I couldn't say it, I didn't remember, I had to say something. So I said, Dad, they're teaching us the Pledge of Allegiance. And I sort of recited the Pledge of Allegiance to my dad, and with his broken English and my broken Spanish, he asked me to translate what that meant. And if you ever tried translating that specific pledge, it's very, very hard. And all I can think of was, injustice for all. And so I said that in Spanish, and he's like, oh, okay. What else? What else is going on? I go, you know what, Dad, it's a promise. They make you put your hand over your heart, so it's like an oath you're taking. And I think he saw that I was struggling with my interpretation, so he just let it go and okay, that's cool. And we moved on. And life went on. We moved from our city where I was raised, and at this point I'm in high school, and I had some bad news of my own, which was scary news, but it was great news that I needed to tell my dad, and that was that my girlfriend was pregnant. And my dad was the kind of guy that can take that. He wanted to talk, so it's like, hey, let's talk, right? So I told him about this big moment in my life, and he supported me and helped. But on January 24th, 1991, when I was this father-to-be, young man in high school, my life was turned upside down when maybe 10, 15 sheriff deputies from Los Angeles stormed into my home and raided my house and hauled me away. I was asleep, my dad was asleep. They didn't care. Came in and took me away. My dad demanded to know what was going on. Why were they there? What did they want? No answers. We get to the sheriff's station. Not we, but me. My dad was still at home. And I was introduced to 2 homicide detectives who wanted to know where I was 6 days before. And they needed to know right there and then where I was at. So I told them I was with my dad. I had gone to school that day. We came home. I did chores. It was very clear that what was happening just 6 days prior. They didn't care. They were adamant that I was in a different city, involved in a drive-by shooting that killed a man by the name of Donald Sarpy. And I hate to admit this part of my story, but I laughed when he said that. I laughed because I couldn't believe that someone could imagine that I can kill someone because I always saw myself as a wimpy kid. So the fact that someone thought, I was capable of killing someone was funny to me. But when these guys didn't laugh back, I knew that they were serious. And so I was hauled away to the juvenile hall, and soon I was pending a court hearing. And when I got to my first court hearing, they told me that I was going to be tried as an adult because of the severity of the crime. In California, there's a law that if the crime is of a severe nature, they can try you as an adult. And so that's where I was headed. But I wasn't worried because when I heard adult, I thought, well, adults will be in the room. They're going to look this over. They understand that they made a mistake, and I'll go home. No big deal. That wasn't the case. It turns out that there were 6 boys out there that night who were witnesses to this crime that happened. One of the boys was taken to the sheriff's station that night, and he said, I know who did it. It's a guy I go to school with. If you show me some photographs, I'll pick him out. So they gathered pictures, and they put these a six-pack array of photographs together. And apparently the initial story was the boy said, that's the guy right there. Franky Carrillo is the guy who murdered Donald Sarpy. Enough reason to arrest me. And that was her evidence. It came down to whose story were you going to believe? The young boy or my father and I, who was my alibi? I was at home. Nothing major, nothing serious happened that night, but it was dinner, went to bed, no big deal. As the trial was just about to begin, they discovered 5 other witnesses. So it was a total of 6 witnesses who were going to come to court and testify that I was the guy shooting this gun. And the trial begins. And I didn't know about criminal justice system. I wasn't aware of the jury system. And my attorney is telling me, they're going to gather 12 people, and they're going to judge, and they're going to be like the jurors and so on. So he's trying to break it down to me and where I can understand what was happening. And again, I heard adults. I saw faces. I saw people like in this audience here. And I figured, okay, that's cool. It sounds like a pretty cool process. Then the court began. And the witnesses came and lied. And I was ultimately wrongfully convicted and given 30 years to life plus life. And that really means forever. I was supposed to serve 30 years to life. I guess you die, and then you come back and you reserve the extra life sentence. But I wasn't, as a young boy, I couldn't understand what that meant, but that's what I thought. Everyone was devastated, and I ended up in jail, then prison. And I can remember thinking, how could this have happened? This could not be happening. Am I dead? Am I alive? All these laws that were in place to protect me failed me. And I would see my dad's face when he would come visit me, and he would be devastated. And we're a modest family, and there wasn't any room for lawyers and investigators. So my dad was really taken by what had happened, not being able to protect me. And when I got to the main prison, somebody gave me some great advice. And they said, Franky, write anyone about your story, and tell them that you're innocent and that you need help. And for the next 15 years of my life, I was trying to be a son, a father. I was coming of age. And I was proclaiming my innocence. That's all I had. No one knew me. No one could vouch for me. No one really cared. And letter after letter, some people would respond, some wouldn't respond. No help. Until ultimately, when I was at Folsom State Prison, where I served the last 10 years of my incarceration, there was a teacher there by the name of Tony Carter who was about to retire. And I told Tony her last week there as an employee at Folsom, I said, would you help me by sharing my story with a reporter, a lawyer, someone you think can help me? Would you just pass along my story? So she said, sure. 6 months later, she had a function in Sacramento. She runs into Ellen Eggers, an attorney from Sacramento, who she shares my story with. And she says, yeah, I'll help out. That led to the Innocence Project getting involved from Northern California. Morrison and Forrester, a huge law firm, got involved. And it took them 5 years to prove that they had the wrong guy. They found the 6 boys who were now men, and each one recanted his testimony and said either he was coerced by the deputy, or they just lied, or they played along. The murderer confessed to the crime, which was huge. We realized that the deputy at the center of this investigation was a bad cop. And 3 years ago was a final hearing where all this evidence that I'm talking to you about now came to light, and a judge said, Franky, you're free to go. You guys can clap there if you want. And I'm really running through the dark part of my story, which was incarceration. Not because I'm going to fall apart here and cry like I'm already doing, but it's because it's something that I prefer to move away from and live my life now that I'm free. And think about my new life a little bit differently than just having to recall those specific memories. But I think about the tragedy that happened that can't be undone. Donald Sarpy, father, husband, from what I hear was a great man, tragically was murdered. My father, midway through my incarceration, dies. But I'm free. I'm now a student, Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. I have a beautiful family, Efti, Sharoni, my beautiful partners here. And I've taken on the responsibility of what my dad would tell me as a young boy. You see, like I mentioned earlier, my dad would say, help when you can. When you see adults, they'll go to you. Or forgive me, go to them, they'll help you. And during my incarceration, I realized what that meant, where I sort of filled in the blank as to what that meant. And for me, I wanted to be the adult that my dad envisioned, or he planted the seed in my head of. And he didn't say things like people were going to be courageous, or people were going to be encouraging or protecting you. Those are things that I added, because that's the way I want to be. That's the adult that I envisioned that I was sort of seeking for. And ultimately, those people came to my rescue. So Scott Wood, Ellen Eggers, Tony Carter, Juan Mejia, and the list goes on and on of people who I feel that were also, when they were young, were told those specific lessons about life. And as DAs, as lawyers, as advocates, they were living up to that. And so for me to attract those people to me was an amazing experience. And so now that I'm home, I want to be one of those adults. I think I'm going to school because I want to be like them, because I know that they had gone to school and so on. And with this being Father's Day weekend, and it's just by happenstance, that's just what's going on here. I really want to honor my father, who really planted the seeds of perseverance, understanding, love, and really compassion. And those are the things that helped me survive. And so Dad and even Donald Sarpy, this man, and all the fathers who are here who I've met, and the adults in the room, thank you. Thank you for being great. Thank you. And I'll leave you with these are my sons here. Not Ernie. Or is it Bert? Forgive me, Bert. I don't know. Theodore, who's 23 years old now, and Akiva, who's 7 months old. Talking about being a dad and an adult. What a privilege. Thank you.